LG G5 is perhaps the hottest TV in the world today, but how does it measure up to last year's excellent LG G4? Let's find out. Up next.
I've seen things people wouldn't believe.
Hey, what's up guys? I'm Brian. This is Tech Therapy. Thank you so much for joining me as we compare the LG G5 to last year's LG G4. Now the brand new G5 has a new primary RGB tandem 4-stack OLED against last year's micro lens array LG G4. Now we filmed these at our good friends at Value Electronics, and our findings were very interesting. At many times they looked very far apart, they looked slightly different, and then they looked very similar. Now the LG G4's biggest weakness was peak brightness and retaining color with that peak brightness. The G5 is a bit brighter, but it's all about the color. So when you see this comparison, looking for which one is brighter isn't really what you're looking for. It's the color that has been added. Now, if you're a G4 owner, you'll be very happy to see how the G4 competes. And if you're a prospective G5 owner, I think you'll be very excited. I have already ordered the 83-inch G5, and this comparison makes my decision very easy to make. Without further ado, let's check out the LG G5 versus last year's LG G4. Thank you so much for watching. All right, guys, let's do it. LG G4 versus LG G5. What differences have you noticed so far? What really jumps out at you? They are subtle, but you can see in this next shot, they are evident. Look at the white versus white, and look at the color of red on the LG G5 versus last year's G4. Now, as I mentioned in the intro, the differences will not be mind-blowing, but you'll have to look throughout the scene to really see what the differences are. You'll see the differences in color here. You'll see the red stripe at the bottom, and you'll see more true white on the G5. Here, what is more true to life? You'd have to ask our good friend Jennifer Gala, which she intends, but since they are shot exactly the same and both TVs are in the same preset, the one on the right is what you're really looking for. You're seeing more color and more saturation, and then in a shot like this, the differences are very subtle. There are times where the G5 will appear much brighter. Times like here when you look at different parts of the glass where you'll see a higher peak brightness showing through. Here with our favorite fire scene from the Fire Girls in one of Jennifer's videos, look at the color in the flames. The orange that is there. Now the weakness of the G4, if you can really call it a weakness, is it was very bright, but it would be at the cost of color, volume, and luminance, where it would get bright and the flames would turn white. Now in certain shots they look very similar, but in the previous shot you can see that there was definitely much more orange in the G5. Now, when you compare the G4 to a quantum dot OLED, the differences in color would be evident. The G4 many times was brighter, but the loss of color you could see. The G5 actually brings that gap closer. Doesn't necessarily surpass QD OLED, I would say it gets very close, but you can see there, the differences is more in color than brightness. There's times where the G4 will actually look brighter simply because it's lacking the color, so keep that in mind as you're watching. Also, as you are watching, think to yourself, are these differences important enough for you to choose the G5 versus the G4? In these penguin scenes, you can definitely see there is a different complete tone on the G5. It just is in many ways a different color. Now the G4 will appear brighter because it looks cooler, but the knock on OLEDs, especially LG OLEDs, is they push blue. That is gone with the LG G5. Now you're seeing two different sizes. The LG G4 is 83 inches, so it's the big beast of LG's lineup in regards to the G4, and the G5 is 77. Now I did have an 83-inch G5 in the room, but that is being broken in for a customer as we are at Value Electronics. Now, why this comparison is important is right now the 83-inch LG G4 and the 77-inch LG G5 are about the same price. So you can ask yourself, would you rather have a larger G4 or a smaller G5? That's why this comparison makes sense. Now, any larger TV will appear brighter as well. I don't always feel that's the case with OLEDs, more so with mini LEDs, but it's worth noting that the G4 is going to appear brighter due to the fact that it's larger, but they are so freaking close in so many shots. It gave me a new respect for the G4, which was my favorite TV last year. See here in the snow, the white is much whiter on the G5, even though the G4 is brighter, or I shouldn't say bright, is plenty bright. Here, the brown or goldish behind the eagle is more deep. There is definitely more color here. Now, why I say it's subtle, in shots like this, you will see that the G4 actually looks brighter, but the differences in color is what makes the G5 at times look not quite as bright. Now, don't get it twisted, the G4 was never considered not colorful, so don't think you're ever going to have the G4 or buy the G4 and say, well, where the heck is the color? That's absolute nonsense. It was just in comparison to a QD OLED, when the TVs would push very bright, you would see that color would disappear a little bit, particularly in flames. You'd see it get white instead of orange. That glow would change. Now, if these TVs were the same size, would it be night and day? No, there would not be night and day. But the G4 at 83 is the big daddy of the group. Love this size. Now, with all transparency, I already bought the G5 at 83 inches even before seeing this comparison, but this solidified it for me. A very special thanks to our good friends at Value Electronics for letting us take over the store for the entire weekend. Please consider making your next AV purchase through them. Check the description below for all of their information. Let them know that Brian from Brian's Tech Therapy sent you. They will take great care of you. They're the only ones that I know of out there that have all of these TVs, not only for us to showcase, but for you to purchase. Thank you, Robert, Wendy, and Leanne. Now in the comments, what are you guys seeing? Now you're also seeing two very glossy panels. The G5 does have an improved reflection handling. The G4 was actually very good in this regard. Now, even though you can see that window in the back on the G4, in fairness, it's not really hitting the G5 the same way, but I would still give the edge to reflection handling to the G5. They are both still very glossy, which I love. Not the best for filming. I was there all day and it was still bright in this room when I did this video. Now, when I was in here filming this, we were also looking at the S95F and S95D, and I did feel that those two TVs were closer together than the G4 and the G5. However, I am also watching this video and doing this dialogue unscripted with you, and at many times I can barely tell the difference, which is excellent for G4 owners and prospective G4 owners. But it's really in the bright scenes or the white like you see here that the difference is evident, because you do have the brighter image without the loss of color. Now also keep in mind, in scenes like this, which is the samurai demo from our good friend at Jennifer Gala, the G4 lost color but then would push color, meaning it would kind of falsify it and make it more saturated and vibrant than was on the reference monitor. What you're seeing on the G5 is really more true to life than what the G4 was pushing. So you may not see a loss of color. The G4 will try and compensate for it, which most of us in the room loved that when we saw it in the shootout last year. You also have a retooled Alpha 11 processor on the G5. The processing on the G4 is also amazing. I will tell you what the big difference is for those of you that game in SDR is the SDR brightness slider, or brightness options I should say, which are off, low, mid, and high, are now unlocked on the G5. On the G4, that is locked. For those of you that game in SDR, that has been very important to many of you, and on the G5, that is there to make as bright as you like if you game in SDR. Now, in shots like these from LG's own demos, the differences aren't as evident. Why? Because the nits aren't very high on these demos. It does show up at times. But it isn't until you put in and check out our good friend Jennifer Gala. Special shout out to the amazing Jennifer Gala and her second channel, HDR Super Channel. Check the description below for links to both of her channels. Most of the content seen within this video and intro are Jen's. Consider becoming a Patreon to her main channel. You can download all of this work in Dolby Atmos and Dolby Vision. Thank you, Jen. But Jen's work is so important because it is filmed anywhere from 2,000 up to 10,000 nits. There are times in this video where the G5 is going to clip, where I'll raise the exposure. I want it to clip to show you the differences in peak brightness. Now, with the issues the G5 has coming out of black and the pixelation, that was mostly solved at the time of this video in terms of streaming Dolby Vision. And when I did the G5 at 83 inches in my previous video, that was somewhat solved. It took an update. Apparently within the UK, that has been solved with a second update. I will check tonight when I compare the G5 to the S95F at Value Electronics, but apparently that is solved. You'll see more depth in the blue. You'll see more shades of color throughout this video. The question for you guys, look at the differences in the trees right there. Is it subtle? Is it worth it to you? Now, for me, the loss of color on the G4 was subtle, so the addition of the color on the G5 will also be subtle. Now, the G4 was my favorite TV last year with a micro lens array, and now to have this new RGB tandem primary 4-stack OLED, however you want to name it, it definitely is doing more, especially in these shots here. But this shot here, not this one, the next one, for me is the big difference. There it's brighter, but here it looks completely different. There's different shades of color. You can see where the G4 is actually pushing a different shade of one solid color versus the gradation. So while you would look at that shot and say, well, hey, it's not lacking color, it was lacking shades of color. The G4 was trying to compromise for the lack of ability to get you there. The G5 can get you there. But then in shots like this in a moment, they look equally deep and beautiful. But what you're seeing on the G5 is more true to life and director's intent, or I should say creator's intent, which is our good friend Jennifer Gala. Now, as we finish up this last Storm demo, it is tradition on this channel to go through the presets at the same time. Now, it's sometimes tricky as I do have one remote controlling them both. What I'm showing you is the flexibility of image and how they look different in each and every preset. I fully don't believe in putting the TVs in Filmmaker and leaving them alone. Look how much difference they are in terms of saturation with each preset. In my opinion, presets are very important. In my thoughts, it is the engineers of the manufacturers telling you their perception, their signature of what each preset means. What's their interpretation of cinema or cinema hone or standard or vivid? With the Alpha 11, even if you are in a vivid preset, you can warm it up, take the sharpness down, and it's great for a bright room. I got that idea from LG's Greg Lee, who actually recommends that people do that if they're in a very bright room. The upscaling is excellent on the Alpha 11, which is on both TVs. No problems at all with motion, but just look at the buildings. There's a slight warmth that the G5 has. That is even more evident when you are in person. And I'm so happy that the fear of raised blacks or coming out of black is gone. But as you can see here, it was really never an issue with streaming anything else other than Dolby Vision. Never had a problem with it in gaming or anything like that. I was okay with it enough to where I did order my 83-inch from Value Electronics. And mine should be here in a week or so. So you'll see that TV behind me for probably a month before I bring it home. Now, if you're seeing more detail in the G4, it's because I do have the exposure up a bit. If it does clip, a lot of these clips that we see from Jen are very high nits. But you can see here the white in the glass, the differences in brightness are evident. Now, a special shout out to community members who watch these videos live with me. I premiere each and every one of my videos so us as a community can be together and watch these videos together. Love you guys. Thank you so much for making the time to watch these videos when they premiere. There, to me, is the biggest difference that we've seen probably thus far. Different shade of yellow, much brighter, but the G4 does look deeper. Now we're going to go from a bright preset to filmmaker, and there still is deeper color on the G5. However, for those of you watching, is that enough of a difference to warrant the purchase or the differences in price? Now the G5 at the time of this recording is really only available at 77 and 83 inches, which is odd. Typically it's 55 and 65. But I will tell you from Wendy and Robert, the G4 inventory is not vast. So if you want to pull the trigger on the G4, the time really is now. And everything that's happening in the world with tariffs and things of that nature, who knows what the prices are. But if you're sleeping on the G4 and you really want the TV, buy it right now. I don't think there's going to be anything available for, say, Black Friday. The prices actually do tend to go up with this crazy world that we're in right now. And the G5 is similar to the price of the G4, slightly cheaper. There's a big difference too as far as the white. And at times they look like they're actually in different presets. Trust me, they are not. Everything is matched up perfectly. Not only did I match up the presets the same way, I went through each option to make sure that nothing was different from generation to generation, meaning temperature, things of that nature are all the same. But what are your thoughts? Now, personally, if it was me and I wanted the 83, and I would go for the 83-inch G4. That's how close they are. I want the 83-inch G5. I was going to get the 83-inch G4 last year, but simply ran out of time as we got into CES, and I'm glad that I waited. But for you guys, you're talking about a TV for the same price at a big size difference. Now, you can tell I should say this, if you look at the TV side by side, they don't look that different in size, but if I line them up perfectly, bezel to bezel, it would be a big deal. Now I'm going to raise the exposure here so the G5 clips. Now why I'm doing that is we're at 10,000 nits. And look at how much brighter the G5 is. Now the color is gone because we're at 10,000 nits, but what this is illustrating is how bright the difference is between the two TVs. The black level is not raised. And now we're back to normal here. Again, more of the snow and the colors in the leaves are different. Bringing back the eagle, there's just more of a goldish brown where it's pretty flat and just a tan almost, or a light brown on the G4. But in this shot here, they are more similar. I was actually blown away by the differences. Even though I love the G4, next to a QD OLED, I could see the differences. Now, I will promise you this. If I took the TVs apart from each other and I put one on one side of the room and one on the other, you would never look at the G4 and think it's missing any color or lacking brightness. You would never look at it and say, ah, man, I need to have more of this. That's how good the G4 is. It's those subtleties that the G5 brings back is what the G4 was weak in. And weak is a very strong word. I should say its shortcomings in comparison to its greatest competitor, which is a QD OLED. I just love these shots right here where it is subtle. Now here you're going to see is that there's more orange in the G5, but the G4 is definitely pushing that saturation. It's not night and day, it is subtle. But if I put a QD OLED next to the G4, that's what you would see in terms of the more orange on the G5. Again, subtle differences, but for enthusiasts, that subtle difference means the world. For me, it does make a big difference. Now, these color differences do translate over to gaming, though I didn't do any gaming. At least I did gaming, but it was part of a stream. I didn't capture any of it. But what do you see? Please in the comments, leave the longest comments you want, the more detailed of what you see. No big deal. Doesn't matter to you. Leave that. You love another, see the differences in the green? There's something else you see that I don't see, leave it. I want as much participation from you guys as possible. And I mentioned the content. Jen's content is extremely challenging. I know a lot of you guys want to see true content. I'm not doing that due to copyright, but even if I did, unless that content has a higher peak brightness or color that's going to push the G5, they'll look identical. This content is where you want to see the differences. If you want to see the differences, this is how it's going to be. These are very bright demos with a ton of color. But look at the shades. Look how different they look from each other. Now, I do think it'd be a little more evident if they were both 77 or both 83, just because the 83 just has a bigger presence. But look at the color on the cans. Look at the color on the back. Little subtle differences and details, more green in the background. Now, clearly these TVs are not blooming. That is just the content, the way it was filmed. I think they're both absolutely gorgeous. Also, big differences in this shot in terms of brightness and color, and even more so in the next shot. I also want to say bravo to LG Displays. They came back with a vengeance with an amazing technology. And I do appreciate the differences where, again, my purchase of the 83-inch G5 is easier for me to make. Now, in closing, I do feel the differences are big enough to warrant the price difference, but that's really up to you. The G4 is an excellent TV. They both have amazing processing. The G5 is available with the primary tandem 4-stack OLED in 55, 65, 77, and 83. The other sizes, 42 and 48, will be bright. They will not have that extra technology, and either will the 97-inch G5, which is a shame. But for 55, 65, 75, and 83, those TVs are monsters. And the 83, it will be the only 83-inch OLED to get this year. Well, the S95F is also using the 4-stack layer, so we'll see when we compare those in a few weeks. But in closing, I love both TVs, but the G5 is a must-buy for me. Clearly, what is it for you? What are your thoughts on it? I'm Brian. This is Tech Therapy. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing. Love you guys. Take care.
It's better to burn out than to fade away.